The night was silent, but his heart was not. He sat alone, staring at the floor, his hands shaking. No one could see the war inside him. No one could feel the weight he was carrying. To the world, he was just another man who had failed. But the truth was far deeper. He had faced something no ordinary person could survive. Once, he had dreams bigger than the sky. He wanted to rise, to shine, to build a life of strength and respect. People around him believed he would make it. Some even said he was born to win. But now, as he sat in the dark, even he could not believe those words. The question was simple but cruel. How did he fall so far? It all began with one moment. One choice. One day that changed everything. That day, he lost more than just a fight. He lost his name, his hope, and his reason to move forward. He remembered the sound of people laughing at him. The sound of whispers saying, "He is finished. He cannot rise again." Each word was like a knife in his chest. Each voice pushed him deeper into the darkness. But here is the truth. The story of this man was not a story of defeat. It was a story of impossible battles. And one day, it would become the story of the greatest comeback. Still, on that night, nothing felt possible. He looked in the mirror. His face was tired. His eyes were heavy. His body was weak. He asked himself, "Who am I now? A loser? A broken man? Or something else?" The silence gave him no answer. But deep inside, in a place he had forgotten, a spark was still alive. A very small spark. A spark of courage. A spark of strength. The world thought he was done. But the world was wrong. This was only the beginning. The battle he faced was not against others. It was against himself, his fear, his pain, his doubts. And that battle was the hardest one of all. He remembered the moment of his fall. He had trained, he had worked, he had given his all. But when the test came, he failed. The ground had shaken under him. His body had collapsed. And in that 1 second, everything he built was gone. He could still see it. The moment replayed in his mind again and again. His hands slipping. His knees breaking. His heart burning. He could still hear the words, "It's over." But was it truly over? He sat in the darkroom, thinking about all those moments. Every failure, every loss, every tear. But there was something strange about his pain. The more he thought about it, the more it began to change. The pain was no longer just pain. It was turning into something else. Something sharper. Something stronger. It was turning into fire. The truth is simple. Pain can break you, or pain can make you. And for him, the choice was coming soon. His story was not just about what he lost. His story was about what he would choose to do next. Would he stay down forever? Or would he rise, even when everyone thought it was impossible? No one knew the answer yet. Not even him. But one thing was clear. His fight was not finished. His war was not over. The darkest night was still hiding the brightest dawn. And as he sat there, broken but breathing, weak but alive, something inside whispered, "Stand. Just stand." He closed his eyes. He could see the faces of those who doubted him. He could hear the voices of those who mocked him. He could feel the chains of failure pulling him down. But in that same moment, he also saw something else. He saw the man he could become. Stronger. Harder. Unstoppable. And that vision, it was enough to keep the spark alive. The impossible battle was waiting. The road ahead was full of storms. But deep inside, the decision was already made. He would not end here. He would not die in the shadow of failure. This was not his last chapter. This was only part 1. Because no matter how hard the fall, he would come back stronger. Before the storm, there was peace. Before the darkness, there was light. He was once a man full of life. He woke up every morning with hope in his eyes and strength in his steps. People around him respected him. They said, "He has a future. He will go far." And he believed them. His days were busy, but they were beautiful. He worked hard, trained harder, and dreamed the hardest. Every night before sleeping, he looked at the stars and whispered to himself, "One day, I will reach higher than this." Life seemed simple, and everything looked possible. But life has a way of testing those who dream big. At first, the tests were small. He failed sometimes, but he stood again. He was rejected once, but he tried again. He thought, "This is normal. Failure is just a step." And for a time, it was true. But then came the moment that broke him. It was a bright morning when the challenge appeared, the biggest challenge of his life. He had been preparing for it for months, maybe even years. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. This was supposed to be his victory. He walked into the arena with fire in his heart. He was confident. He thought nothing could stop him now. His family was proud. His friends were excited. Even strangers whispered, "He will win today." But destiny had a different plan. The first minutes were strong. He pushed forward with all his power. His moves were sharp. His will was unshakable. For a moment, it looked like he was unstoppable. But then, it happened. A small mistake. A wrong step. One moment of weakness. And everything fell apart. He slipped. He stumbled. His strength began to leave him. His mind screamed, "Fight!" But his body refused. His heart shouted, "Stand!" But his knees gave way. The audience went silent for a second. And then the whispers began. "Is he losing? What's happening? No, it can't be him." But it was him. The man everyone believed in was falling right in front of their eyes. He tried to rise, but he couldn't. He tried to push back, but he failed. The more he fought, the weaker he became. Until finally, he collapsed. The sound of his fall was louder than thunder in his own ears. And then came the final words, the words he could never forget. "It's over." Those words cut deeper than any wound. His dream was gone. His chance was gone. And with it, his hope was gone. He lay on the ground, staring at the ceiling above him. He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. But no voice came out. Only silence. The people around him turned away. Some shook their heads. Some whispered. Some even laughed. And in that moment, he felt smaller than he had ever felt before. The man who was supposed to rise had fallen. The man who was supposed to inspire had failed. Days passed, but the pain remained. Nights passed, but the memory never left. Everywhere he went, he could hear the echoes of those whispers. "He is finished. He cannot rise again." At first, he tried to ignore it. He told himself, "It was only one failure. I can come back." But deep inside, a voice kept repeating, "No, you can't. It's over." That voice was louder than the support of his friends. Louder than his own belief. Louder than hope itself. He stopped training. He stopped dreaming. He stopped living the way he once did. The fire in his eyes was gone. The strength in his steps had disappeared. He became a shadow of the man he used to be. And yet, even in the middle of this fall, something strange was happening. The pain he felt was breaking him, yes. But it was also shaping him. Each tear, each failure, each cruel word was turning into something. It was becoming fuel. He didn't see it yet. He didn't believe it yet. But the truth was this: sometimes you must fall to know how strong you can rise. His fall was not the end. It was only the test before the rise. But for now, he was still broken. Still lost. Still trapped in the shadow of his own defeat. The world had seen him fall. The world believed he was finished. But they were wrong. Because the battle he had to fight was not against the world. It was against himself. And that battle was only beginning. He thought his fall was the worst pain of his life. But he was wrong. The real pain came after. Every morning, he woke up with the same question in his mind. Why try again? Why stand up when I will only fall once more? The world outside kept moving, but his world had stopped. His friends moved on. His rivals grew stronger. His supporters became silent. And he was left alone in the middle of his broken dreams. Each day was like a war. But it was not a war against people. It was a war inside his own mind. When he tried to train, his body felt weak. When he tried to dream, his heart whispered, "You cannot do it." And when he tried to believe, the memory of his failure stood in front of him like a shadow, laughing. He had faced enemies before, but this was different. This enemy was invisible. This enemy was inside him. The impossible battle had begun. He battled sleepless nights. He battled his fears. He battled the voices in his head telling him to quit. At times, he even asked himself, what is the point of living like this? What is left for me now? But even when he asked that, something inside him refused to die. A spark. A tiny spark of strength. Still, the battle was brutal. He would wake up at night covered in sweat, hearing the same words, "It's over. You are finished." He would walk on the streets, and every laugh, every whisper reminded him of his fall. His heart grew heavier with each step. Some days, he thought about leaving it all. Disappearing. Ending the fight forever. But then, a question hit him. If I give up now, will this be the story of my life? A story of failure. A story of defeat. That thought scared him more than failure itself. So, even in his weakest moments, he kept trying. He picked up the pieces, slowly. He took small steps, even when his legs felt broken. He tried again, even when his heart screamed to stop. It was not easy. Nothing was easy anymore. When he lifted weights, his arms shook. When he ran, his lungs burned. When he practiced, he failed again and again. But he did not stop. Each failure was like a knife cutting deeper into him. But strangely, each cut made him harder, stronger. The impossible battle was not about winning against the world. It was about refusing to surrender to himself. Day after day, he fought. He fell. He rose. He fell again. And he rose again. He was not winning yet. But he was not losing either. Because the truth was this, as long as he was still fighting, he was not defeated. The people around him did not see this silent war. They thought he was still broken. They thought he was still weak. But deep inside, a storm was building. Yes, he was bruised. Yes, he was scarred. But he was learning something powerful. He was learning how to endure. And endurance is the seed of greatness. His body was weak, but his spirit was slowly becoming unbreakable. Each tear, each scar, each painful night was turning into armor. And then came a moment. A simple moment that changed everything. He stood in front of the mirror, just like the night after his fall. But this time, something was different. He did not see a broken man anymore. He saw a fighter. A man who had fallen but had not given up. A man who was ready to fight again. He whispered to himself, "I am not finished. Not yet." The impossible battle was still going on. The challenges were still waiting. But something had changed. Now, he was no longer afraid of the pain. Now, he welcomed it. Because he knew, if pain could not break him, nothing else could. And so, the man who had once fallen began to rise again. Slowly. Step by step. Day by day. The impossible battle was shaping him into something new. Something stronger. Something unstoppable. But little did he know, the hardest test was still ahead. And when it arrived, it would decide everything. The days of pain did not end. The nights of fear did not vanish. The battle was still there, burning inside him. But something had changed. He was tired of running from his own shadow. Tired of hearing the same words. It's over. Tired of living like a ghost in the ruins of his past. One morning, as the sun rose slowly through the clouds, he stood by the window. His face was pale, his body still weak, but his eyes carried a new fire. He whispered to himself, "Enough. Enough of fear. Enough of silence. I will not end like this." That was the moment that turned his story. It was not a loud decision. It was not a grand speech. It was a quiet voice inside his soul saying, "Fight again." And sometimes, the quietest voices are the strongest ones. The first step was small. He tied his shoes and went for a run. His legs hurt, his breath was heavy, and after just a few minutes, he collapsed on the ground. But he smiled. Yes, he smiled, because this time he did not quit. He got up, dusted himself and whispered, "Tomorrow, I will go farther." And he did. Day after day, he kept moving. At first, only a little. Then more. Then even more. His body was not ready, but his will forced it forward. When people saw him struggling again, they laughed. "Look at him. He still thinks he can win," they said. But he no longer cared. Their words could not cut him anymore. He had already been cut deeper than anyone could imagine. He had already faced the worst pain. And once you have faced the worst, nothing else is frightening. Slowly, his small steps became longer. His weak arms became harder. His broken spirit began to heal. He started to train seriously again. Every push-up was a battle. Every drop of sweat was proof of his fight. Every scar on his body was now a medal of survival. He was not the same man anymore. Before, he was chasing victory to prove himself to others. Now, he was chasing victory to prove himself to himself. And that made all the difference. But the road was still not easy. Every day brought new pain. Every night brought new doubts. There were times he felt like quitting again. Times when his body screamed, "Stop!" Yet each time, his heart answered, "No. Keep going." That was the turning point, the birth of a fighter who refused to surrender. People began to notice. They saw him running when everyone else was resting. They saw him training when no one else was watching. Some mocked him, but others started to whisper, maybe he can rise again." He ignored them all. His eyes were fixed only on the road ahead. One evening, after a long day of training, he looked in the mirror again. For the first time in months, he did not see weakness. He saw strength. He saw scars, yes, but scars that told a story of survival. He whispered to himself, "I am not finished. I am just beginning." The man who once lay broken on the ground had chosen to rise. And that choice changed everything. It was not destiny that lifted him. It was not luck that saved him. It was his decision. The decision to fight again. And that decision is what makes a man unstoppable. Still, the road to victory was long. Still, the tests ahead were dangerous. But now, he was no longer afraid of falling. Because he had learned the secret, falling is not the end, staying down is. He was ready. Ready for the storms. Ready for the tests. Ready for the world that once laughed at him. But most of all, he was ready to face himself. The turning point had come. The man who was once broken was now unshakable. And as the sun set that evening, one thought burned in his heart. The world has not seen the last of me. The battle is not over. My time will come. But what he did not know was that the time was coming sooner than he ever expected. The road was long, the nights were heavy, but he did not stop. Day after day, he kept fighting. Step by step, he was becoming stronger. His body changed first. The weak arms that once shook now carried weight with power. His lungs that once burned now breathed with control. His legs that once collapsed now ran faster than ever before. But it was not just his body. It was his mind. His thoughts were sharper. His will was harder. His spirit was unbreakable. This was not the same man who once lay broken on the floor. This was someone new, someone born from pain, built by struggle, and sharpened by failure. Every morning, he woke up before the sun. He trained when others still slept. He pushed himself when others rested. Sweat poured, scars formed, but he smiled through it all. Because now he knew the truth. Pain was not his enemy. Pain was his teacher. The more it hurt, the more he grew. The more he struggled, the more he learned. Slowly, the people around him began to notice. At first, they laughed. "He will break again," they said. But when they saw him still standing, still fighting, their laughter faded. Then came the whispers. "He is changing. Look at him. He is not the same." Some doubted. Some feared. And some began to respect him again. But he did not care for their words, whether they mocked or praised. He was not rising for them. He was rising for himself. Each day was a battle, but each battle was a victory. One push-up more than yesterday. 1 mile farther than last week. One failure turned into strength. And these small victories began to build a mountain. He stood taller now. His eyes carried fire again. His steps were steady, full of purpose. People who once pitied him now looked at him with surprise. They asked themselves, "Is this the same man who had fallen?" Yes, it was the same man, but a very different version. He had been broken. But now, he was rebuilt. He had been weak. But now, he was stronger than ever before. This was the rise. The comeback no one believed in. The comeback even he once thought was impossible. And yet, here he was. Standing. Fighting. Growing. He faced the same challenges as before, but this time, he was different. His fear was gone. His doubt was gone. His heart was steady. Every scar told him he had survived worse. Every failure reminded him he had risen again. The impossible no longer scared him. Because he was living proof that the impossible could be beaten. The people around him watched in silence. Some admired him, some envied him, and some waited for him to fall again. But deep inside, he knew, he would not fall this time. He had rebuilt his foundation on something stronger than talent, stronger than luck. He had built it on endurance, discipline, and courage. One day, he walked back into the same arena where he had once fallen. The memories hit him, the whispers, the laughter, the moment of collapse. But this time, he did not feel fear. He felt fire. He looked around, and instead of shame, he felt pride. Instead of weakness, he felt power. He whispered to himself, "I fell here once. But today, I stand here as a new man." The rise was not complete yet. The final battle was still ahead. But one thing was clear. He was no longer the man who was broken. He was the man who refused to stay broken. And when a man learns how to rise from the ashes, he becomes unstoppable. Still, the story was not finished. Because the world had one more test for him. A test greater than all the pain, greater than all the battles before. And that test would decide his true victory. The day had come. The day he had dreamed about, the day he had trained for, the day he had bled for. He stood in the same place where he had once fallen. But this time, he was not the same man. His body was stronger, his spirit was harder, and his mind was sharper than ever before. The crowd gathered again. Some came to see him win. Some came to see him fail again. Whispers filled the air. Will he fall again? Has he really changed? Let's see if he can survive this. He heard every word, but none of them shook him. He was not here to prove them wrong. He was here to prove himself right. The test began. At first, it was hard. His opponents were strong, the challenges were heavy, and his body screamed with pain. Sweat poured down his face. His muscles shook. For a moment, it felt like history was repeating itself. But then, something inside him answered. Not this time. Every step he took, he remembered his pain. Every move he made, he remembered his scars. Every push, he remembered the nights when he almost gave up. And that memory gave him strength. He was not fighting with fear anymore. He was fighting with purpose. The crowd saw it. The same man who once collapsed was now standing tall, unshakable, unstoppable. Each strike, each push, each move carried the weight of his struggle. And slowly, the tide turned. His enemies grew weaker. He grew stronger. The whispers in the crowd began to change. Look at him. He's not the same. He's winning. Yes, he was winning. Not just the battle in front of him, but the battle inside him. Every time he pushed forward, he crushed another piece of fear. Every time he rose higher, he destroyed another doubt. And then came the final moment. One last test. One final challenge. The same kind of challenge that once broke him. The same kind of challenge that once left him lying on the ground. But this time, he was ready. He looked it in the eye and whispered, "You broke me once. You will not break me again." With every ounce of strength, with every drop of willpower, he pushed. His body burned, his muscles screamed, but his heart refused to stop. And then, it was over. The impossible had been defeated. The man who was once broken had now conquered. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some cried, some stood in silence, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. But he did not hear the noise. He closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling, and let the truth sink in. He had done it. He had battled the impossible. But the real victory was not in winning this test. The real victory was something far greater. He had defeated his fear. He had defeated his doubt. He had defeated the voice that once told him, "It's over." That was his true victory. He did not just come back stronger in body. He came back stronger in spirit. And in that moment, he realized something powerful. The strongest man is not the one who never falls. The strongest man is the one who falls, and still rises again. His story was no longer a story of failure. It was a story of hope. A story that proved no matter how deep you fall, you can always rise again. The world saw him as a winner that day. But he knew the truth. He was not just a winner. He was a survivor. A fighter. A man who had been broken into pieces but built himself back, piece by piece, stronger than ever before. And as he stood tall, his eyes looked beyond the crowd, beyond the arena, beyond the moment. Because he knew. This was not the end of his story. This was only the beginning of a new one.